I thought graduation would be a day of pride, accomplishment, and celebration, but instead my husband Aaron chose a Super Bowl party over me, then had the audacity to ask me for money immediately afterward. That moment cracked something inside me, revealing the true depth of his selfishness and manipulation. What followed was a journey of quiet, calculated revenge, uncovering not only his betrayals but also the hidden sabotage from those around me who tried to block my success. Step by step, I dismantled their control, turning their own schemes against them, all while securing my independence, my education, and my future. In the end, I didn't need drama or confrontation. I emerged empowered, unshakable, and victorious, reclaiming my life with patience, strategy, and silent strength. I used to believe that life changed in loud moments, the kind you could hear crack across the sky. But the truth is, the world tilts in silence, almost too quietly to notice. Mine shifted on a snowy Colorado morning, long before the graduation ceremony that should have marked a new beginning. The day began still, almost gentle. I woke before my alarm, the kind of early that made the house feel sacred. Unbothered. The furnace hummed beneath the floorboards, and the slightest sliver of dawn slipped between the blinds. This was supposed to be the day, my day. The day I finally proved to myself that every night class, every shift swap, every moment spent studying in my car between work and home, had a purpose. I wanted someone to be proud of me. I wanted him to be proud of me. But even then, something felt off. My husband, Mason, wasn't in bed. The sheets were cold on his side. That alone wasn't unusual. He liked staying up late. Games, sports commentary, rabbit holes, online fantasy leagues he took far too seriously. But today wasn't a normal day. Today, I needed him. Or at least I thought I did. I walked into the kitchen and found him leaning over his phone, grinning at something on the screen. His eyes were lit in that way, wide, boyish, a little too eager. He didn't notice me at first. He only noticed when I cleared my throat. He glanced up, half distracted. "Oh hey babe. Big day, right?" No hug. No smile. Just acknowledgement. Bare minimum presence. Hope is a funny thing. Despite the lukewarm greeting, I convinced myself it would get better. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he'd surprise me later. Denial is warm. Familiar. A place you return to even when you know better. As I poured my coffee, I asked casually, "Did you sleep okay?" He shrugged, still scrolling. "Didn't sleep much. The guys are hyped. Super Bowl today." There it was. The first thread in the unraveling. I honestly tried to keep my voice light. "I know. But the ceremony starts at 2. We should probably leave by 1. Silence. He stopped scrolling. Not to look at me, but to think. Which is always worse. Finally, he said, "Yeah. About that." I felt the air change before the words even fully left him. "You're not canceling on me, right?" I asked gently, carefully. He winced. A subtle flinch. Then he leaned against the counter, rubbing the back of his neck like the guilt was already itching at him. "The guys planned this whole party," he said. "It's the Super Bowl, Shay. We only get this once a year. Graduation is once in a lifetime." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The silence between us did the screaming. He stared blank, unbothered, already emotionally clocked into a different room. "You already know I'm proud of you," he said. "A ceremony is just symbolic. I'll make it up to you." I remember thinking that if I didn't breathe carefully, everything inside me might spill right onto the floor. It's strange. You think marriages end in shouting matches or slam doors. But some die right there in kitchens, over coffee, with words that sound reasonable but feel like knives. I nodded, pretending to understand. Pretending it was fine. Pretending I wasn't being abandoned on the day I needed him most. He kissed my cheek. Barely. Like obligation, not affection. "Send me pictures," he said. And that was that. I drove myself. I sat among supportive families, proud partners, cheering parents, people holding flowers and signs and smartphones, and I clapped along when my classmates were called, each greeted by someone who cared. When my name echoed through the auditorium, it felt like both a triumph and a funeral. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure who I'd been trying to succeed for. After the ceremony, as I stood outside surrounded by laughter and hugs I wasn't a part of, my phone buzzed. A text from Mason. "Hey babe, quick question. Can you Zelle me $450?" Need it for beer, snacks, and I'm short on rent this month. I stared at the screen for a long time, long enough for the cold air to bite my fingers, long enough for something inside me to quietly, irrevocably shift. This wasn't just inconsiderate. It wasn't just disappointing. It was revealing. I realized he hadn't skipped my graduation for fun. He skipped it because I wasn't a priority. Not even in his top 5. I didn't reply immediately. I just stood there, watching snowflakes melt on my gown. The world around me was loud, shouting, hugging, celebrating, but inside, everything went perfectly still. This is where my story begins. Not in the ceremony, but in the silence that followed. A silence that became clarity. A clarity that became strategy. He didn't know it yet, but missing my graduation was the last mistake he'd make without consequences. And when he asked me for money, he handed me the first loose thread in his entire web. I just had to start pulling. What I discovered when I checked our accounts that night told me everything I needed to know about who Mason really was. And the life he built behind my back. You'd think betrayal announces itself with thunder. But mine arrived in the quiet ping of a banking notification. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just digital truth. A truth that began unraveling everything I thought I knew about my marriage. When I got home from graduation, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my gown. I didn't even remove my heels. I walked straight to the dining table, opened my laptop, and logged into our joint accounts. The screen loaded slowly, painfully slow, like it understood the weight of what it was about to reveal. When the numbers finally appeared, I felt my stomach pitch downward. We were nearly $7,800 short. Not total. Short. As in money missing that shouldn't be missing. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I refreshed the page. Refreshed again. The number didn't change. That wasn't even the first red flag. 3 months of rent withdrawals I didn't recognize. Online transfers scheduled to accounts I'd never seen. A PayPal statement littered with sports betting entries labeled micro wagers, small amounts individually, but collectively, thousands. He hadn't just skipped my graduation. He'd been skipping reality. I leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking beneath me as if it, too, felt the weight of everything falling out of place. For a moment, I just watched the screen. The glow lit the room enough to reveal my reflection still in my gown, the tassel crooked, mascara slightly smudged. I looked like a woman who didn't know she'd been losing long before she even started playing. My phone buzzed again. A message from Aaron. Babe? Did you get my text? I need the 450 as soon as possible. The guys are already here. He was partying, laughing, drinking. While I was sitting here learning that our life had holes in it I never knew existed. I didn't text back, but the silence didn't help. It only made me more aware of what I'd ignored for so long. There's a strange emotional shift when suspicion becomes proof. Not anger. Not even heartbreak. Clarity. Cold, biting clarity. I started seeing everything differently. The late-night work hangouts. The unexpected overdraft fees he waved off. The times he dismissed my questions with a distracted kiss. They weren't quirks. They were symptoms. Hints at the double life he'd curated with the ease of someone certain he'd never be caught. But why now? That question echoed louder than anything. Why ask me for money today? Why skip the one day that symbolized my growth? Why choose a football party over a milestone I bled years for? And then it hit me. He never expected me to check the accounts. Not on a day like this. Not after a ceremony he assumed would overwhelm me with joy. He thought I'd be too distracted, too proud, to notice. He didn't understand me at all. Around 7 that evening, I heard his truck in the driveway. Loud music. Laughter spilling from the cracked windows. The kind of careless joy only ignorance allows. He didn't come inside right away. He stayed out there talking loudly with his friends. About the game. About beer. About a bet he nearly won. Nearly. The word felt ironic. I listened from behind the door, the sound of their oblivious excitement flooding through me like static. When he finally came inside, he didn't even notice my gown. He didn't ask how the ceremony was. He didn't register the silent ache sitting in the room like a storm cloud. He just said, "Did you send the money?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Because this wasn't a fight. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the moment I realized I'd been living in a marriage built on convenience. His convenience. His comfort. His needs. Mine were optional. Something inside me shifted. I watched him pull off his jacket, toss it on the couch, kick his shoes across the room without looking where they landed. He was comfortable, confident, carelessly secure in the belief that I would bend, again and again, without consequence. And maybe I had, for years, but not anymore. I walked past him slow, steady, deliberate and took a seat at the table again. He asked me a second time, more annoyed now, more entitled. "Shay, the money." I told the guys we'd cover the rest of the beer. "We?" I asked softly. He blinked. "Well, yeah. We're married." A marriage wasn't what he meant. He meant my money, my income, my reliability, the convenience of having a wife who filled in the gaps he created. But I didn't argue. I didn't explain the numbers I found. I didn't confront him with questions he didn't deserve answers to. I simply said, "We'll talk tomorrow." He scoffed. "It'll be too late by then." I looked him dead in the eyes. Unblinking, unmoved. "That's okay." And that was the first moment, the very first crack, where something in him flickered. Confusion. Unease. A tiny flash of awareness that for the first time, I wasn't playing along. He didn't know it yet. But that was the moment the power shifted. And the silence that followed? The long, heavy, suffocating silence? That was the moment my revenge was born. Because when he finally fell asleep that night, snoring loudly, proudly, obliviously, I opened his phone. And what I found next wasn't about money, it was about truth. A truth far more expensive than $7,800. Some betrayals are loud. Mine was a whisper in the dark. A glow from a phone screen at 2:14 a.m. I never meant to open his phone. Truly. I'm not the snooping type, never have been. But sometimes life places a key in your hand and dares you to turn it. And that night, with Aaron sleeping beside me so peacefully, as if he hadn't gutted me only hours before, I turned it. The bedroom was pitch black except for the faint streetlight bleeding through the blinds. His phone buzzed on his nightstand, a notification, then another. Aaron didn't stir. Sports apps, group chat pings. His world, continuing effortlessly, even while mine had begun shifting like unstable ground. I stared at that screen, glowing like a secret begging to be uncovered. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for context. Answers. Anything to make sense of the missing money, the disrespect, the casual cruelty. He'd dug the hole. I was simply shining a light into it. So I picked up the phone. A subtle swipe of his thumb, he always fell asleep with it slightly on the edge of the home button. The device unlocked instantly. That ease. That trust he assumed I'd never break. It almost made me laugh. I opened messages first. Not because I suspected infidelity. I suspected irresponsibility bets. Friends, maybe someone pressuring him for money. But what I found, it wasn't another woman. It was worse. A group chat named, "Boys Only Know Wives." I opened it, expecting sports banter. And yes, most of it was trash talk, memes, unhealthy amounts of football obsession. But then I saw my name. Not directly. Not respectfully. Not lovingly. I saw messages like, "Shay won't notice. She never looks. Just tell her you'll pay her back. She falls for it every time. Bro, she's at graduation. Just grab from the joint account and act surprised later. Your wife doesn't understand sports anyway. She'll forgive you, she always does." I felt something inside me contract. A tight, quiet breaking. Not because the messages were cruel, but because they were casual. Cruelty with intent hurts. Cruelty without thought. That's the kind that stays with you forever. The worst line of all. One message, sent by Mason himself at 1:07 p.m. that day, right before my ceremony began. "If she cries, she cries. She's dramatic. She'll get over it." My heart didn't break. It hardened. I almost stopped there, almost closed the phone, almost accepted that this was who he was, immature, dismissive, painfully unaware. But then I saw another notification pop up. Cash App, transfer confirmed $400, sent to a username I didn't recognize. A second notification followed. Venmo request, for last night plus owed from January. Last night? Owed? January? A cold realization spread through me, slow and deliberate. Money wasn't his only secret. Just the first layer. I opened his banking app. Snooping transformed into investigation. A quiet, controlled autopsy of a marriage. And what I found? It wasn't infidelity. It wasn't gambling. It was debt. Hidden debt. Thousands. Credit cards I never knew he opened. Personal loans with high interest rates. Payment reminders he'd ignored so long they'd gone to collections. And worse. Transfers to accounts labeled only with initials. M, D, R, J, S, B. At first I thought, friends? But the amounts were too structured. Too consistent. Weekly. Bi-weekly. Sometimes daily. Not gambling. Not affairs. He was funding his friends' habits. Beer runs. Late-night food deliveries. Small bets. Entry fees for fantasy leagues. Split bills he paid entirely and told them to get him back later. He was their bank. Their wallet. Their safety net. And I was his. He didn't skip my graduation for a party. He skipped it because his loyalty wasn't to me. It was to them. The boys who hyped him up. The boys who needed him. The boys he thought made him feel important. He chose them over me. Consistently. Recklessly. Stupidly. And then I found the final piece. One transfer stood out. $1,200. Sent to M. D. O. Memo. For the couch. What couch? We hadn't bought a couch. And then it clicked. He'd loaned one of his friends the exact amount we'd saved for our anniversary trip last year. The trip he said we couldn't afford. That was the moment my hands stopped trembling. That was the moment pain crystallized into purpose. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, watching my reflection stare back at me. A woman just beginning to understand the scale of her own denial. He wasn't a bad husband. He was a careless man. A selfish one. A little boy in a grown man's body, clinging to friendships that validated every immature instinct he had. And I had been the adult. The provider. The emotional stabilizer. The one who patched holes he never acknowledged making. But not anymore. I closed his phone. Gently. Not out of fear. But out of intention. Because men like Aaron? They never notice when you finally stop forgiving them. They only notice when the consequences arrive. And I was already planning them. Quietly. Methodically. With the same precision I used in every class, every exam, every step it took to earn that degree he dismissed so easily. He didn't know it yet. But everything he hid, I would use. Every transaction. Every debt. Every lie. Not to destroy him, but to free myself. Because when morning came, and he woke up hungover, smiling lazily as if nothing had shifted, I looked at him differently. Not like a husband. Not like a partner. But like a puzzle. One I had every intention of solving. And the first piece? Was waiting for me at the bottom of an email in his inbox. An email he never thought I'd see. Morning sunlight can be cruel. It exposes the things the night tried to protect you from. Your own thoughts, your own truths, your own capacity for denial. And that morning, I woke up beside a man who didn't know his life had changed while he slept. He stretched. He groaned. He checked his phone, scrolling casually through notifications I had already memorized. He didn't even look at me. Not a glance. Not a good morning. Just the comfortable silence of someone who believed I was still his safety net. But safety was no longer part of my job description. After he finally dragged himself out of bed to take a shower, I opened my laptop. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady. Steady is dangerous. I was going through his financial mess from the night before, trying to map out patterns, when I saw it. A forwarded email copied into the shared cloud folder he'd forgotten we still had connected. His name in the subject line. Second notice, urgent response required. Aaron rarely checked emails. He skimmed, deleted, forgot. I opened it. And there it was. A notice from his employer. Not a firing notice. A warning. A performance warning tied to behavior. Missed deadlines, disappearing during work hours, complaints from colleagues, reports of him gambling during breaks, and something else. Company property issued to him had gone missing. A tablet. A work-issued microphone. A few camera accessories. Total value. $1,900. The company demanded return or repayment. He had done neither. But the part that made my skin crawl was the timestamp. The email arrived 2 hours before my graduation ceremony. 2 hours. That explained why he left the house early. Why he said he was running errands. Why he never made it to the auditorium at all. He wasn't at his brother's place. He wasn't stuck in traffic. He was hiding from the consequences of his own choices. His footsteps echoed down the hall. I closed the laptop slowly. Not because I feared being caught, but because strategy requires timing, and timing requires patience. He walked into the kitchen, shirtless, still damp, hair dripping onto the tile, carelessly unaware. Emotionally absent. I studied him the way you study a house you once thought you loved, wondering if it was always this flawed, or if cracks had simply become visible now that you finally turned on the lights. Morning, he muttered, yawning. I responded with a quiet, morning. He smirked. Hey, did you send the money last night? The guys were saying. I didn't. I said it gently. Too gently. He blinked, confused. Not angry yet, just inconvenienced. Okay. So can you send it now? I'm heading out later. It hit me then the entitlement wasn't learned. It was instinctual. And I was done feeding instincts. No, I said softly. He froze. Actually froze. What? Not shocked. Not hurt. Just offended that the universe dared shift beneath his feet. I won't be sending any more money, I repeated. He laughed. Actually laughed, as if I'd told a joke with poor delivery. Shay, come on. We're married. It's our money. I tilted my head. Our money? No anger. No raised voice. Just a question. But it was enough to make his eyes narrow. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I whispered, we'll talk later. He didn't like that answer. Men who rely on chaos often fear silence. He slammed a cupboard. I don't know what your problem is, but you're acting weird. Weird. Not hurt. Not betrayed. Not heartbroken. Just inconvenient to him. After he left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, I reopened my laptop. I reread the email. Reviewed the financial records. Cross-checked his transactions. But what I uncovered next. It was worse. A credit card in my name. Opened 6 months ago. Without my consent. With my social security number. Maxed out at $2,500. My throat tightened. Not from pain. From a cold, measured rage. He hadn't just used me. He'd impersonated me. He'd crossed into the realm of things that were no longer emotional. No longer marital. But legal. That's when my suspicion sharpened into certainty. This wasn't a good man making bad choices. This was a reckless man expecting me to live with the fallout of his weakness. And I wouldn't. While he was out with his friends enduring his hangover with the grace of a toddler, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Cheyenne Carson? This is Collections Management for Denver Card Services. We're reaching out regarding your missed payments on SPI. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. I felt a chilling stillness wash over me. I thanked the rep, hung up, and stared at the wall. He hadn't just borrowed money. He'd borrowed my identity. And the part that unsettled me most. He never imagined I would find out. Not through the email. Not through the account. Not through the debt collectors. He believed, truly believed, that I would stay in the dark. He depended on my devotion. My trust. My routine. My tendency to forgive quietly. He counted on my silence. He mistook silence for ignorance. Now? I would use silence as a weapon. Late that night, while he slept again, mouth open, snoring, unaware, I returned to his phone. This time, with purpose. I found the photos of receipts he'd hidden. The credit card applications he'd screenshotted. The messages where friends thanked him for covering them. I found the email thread confirming he'd pawned the company tablet. $600 cash. Blown in less than a week. I found proof of gambling bets on offshore apps he thought didn't leave a trail. And then, I found a draft email addressed to me. Unsent. Shay. I didn't want to tell you this because I knew you'd be mad. The draft went on to explain a temporary financial situation, a misunderstanding with the bank, and his intention to fix everything before it affected us. It was unfinished, sloppy, panicked, but the existence of the draft told me one thing. He knew consequences were coming. He just didn't know they were coming from me. Because the next morning, I contacted someone he never expected. Not a lawyer, not a friend, not his employer. Someone far closer, far quieter, far more dangerous to his sense of control. And that conversation, that single, calm conversation, changed everything. I used to think heartbreak was loud, something that ripped through the room like a slammed door or a shouted accusation. But the truth? It's quiet. It creeps. It waits. It studies you. And then it chooses its moment. Always when your guard is down. Always when you still believe there's something worth saving. That moment found me 3 days after graduation. I was already awake, but for good reasons. See, after the graduation fiasco, I had been watching my husband the way one watches a wolf pretending to be a dog, same shape, different hunger. He'd been unusually sweet. Too sweet. The kind of sweet that makes your teeth hurt and your instincts sharpen. So when his phone buzzed at 2:14 a.m., and he jolted awake like guilt had slapped him across the face, something inside me crystallized. He didn't look at me. He didn't even breathe naturally. He just grabbed the phone, turned away from me on the bed, and whispered. My husband never whispered. He was the type who thought volume proved importance. And just like that, I was wide awake. Not with fear. Not with heartbreak. With clarity. I owe you one. That's what the notification preview read before he snatched the phone away. A woman's name. One I didn't know. One he didn't offer to explain. He whispered for 31 seconds. I counted. Quietly. Not out of obsession, but out of survival. When he hung up, he rolled back toward me and made some half-mumbled excuse about work stuff. Work? At 2:14 a.m. With a wink emoji. I didn't respond. Silence is a mirror. It forces people to look at themselves. He hated that mirror. It was the reason behind her message. The reason behind the whispering. The reason behind the sudden sweetness. And I learned that reason the next evening. I came home early, an accident of timing. A cancelled client meeting, only to hear him in the kitchen, laughing. Laughing the way he used to laugh with me, back when things were simple and love didn't require proof. I froze near the hallway, just out of sight. He didn't see me. He never checked anymore. He told whoever was on the other end of the line, "I'll get the cash from Cheyenne. She won't question it. She feels guilty. It'll be easy." Guilty? For what? For graduating? For wanting him there? I held my breath. Stayed very, very still. When people think they're speaking in safety, you learn the truth fast. He continued. "Nah, she's not gonna find out. She's too busy playing the perfect wife graduate role. Trust me, she'll transfer it. Transfer. Cash. To cover. What?" He laughed again, and said the words that carved themselves into the walls of my chest. That night was worth it. The Super Bowl party, the hotel, honestly one of the best nights I've had in a long time. Hotel. He skipped my graduation. To take another woman to a hotel. Then planned to ask me for money, to cover what he spent on her. That was the moment my heartbreak finally stopped begging to be understood. It stepped aside. And something colder took its place. Not because I was scared he'd see me, but because I didn't trust what my face looked like. I needed my expression to be calm when I walked in, when he turned and kissed my cheek like he hadn't just been celebrating my humiliation. But I didn't walk in. I slipped out the back door, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel for 20 full minutes. It was a hotel. I said that sentence out loud. Not for him, for myself. To make the betrayal real. To make the anger realer. I didn't cry that night. Not one tear. I had already cried enough for missed milestones, broken promises, and the kind of love that only one partner tries to hold up. What came instead was an idea. Small at first. A seed. A whisper. And when I finally went back inside the house, mask on, voice steady, he walked up, kissed my forehead, and said, "Hey babe. I was thinking, do you mind sending me $2,500? I'm in a tight spot." I looked at him. Really looked. The eyes that used to adore me were now calculating me. And right then, everything inside me clicked into place. He had no idea that I already knew. He had no idea that his tight spot was about to become a trap of his own making. He had no idea that this exact moment, was about to define the rest of our story. Because what I did next was the first move in a revenge he never saw coming. People assume the fallout from betrayal is explosive, dramatic. Tears, screaming, thrown objects, a shattered glass, maybe even a slammed door. But the real aftermath, the honest one? It's quiet. Like someone turned down the volume on your soul. That's the night when emotions don't rush out of you. They drain, drop by drop. And that's exactly how I felt the moment he asked me for $2,500. He stood there, shoulders loose, voice casual, eyes confident in my predictable generosity. He expected me to say yes without hesitation, to hand him money like it was my role. My routine. But routine only survives when respect does. And he had spent that at a hotel with another woman. I stared at him for a heartbeat too long. Not with shock. Not with pain. With recognition. This man, my husband, had stopped seeing me as a partner long before he skipped my graduation. I was a resource. A convenience. A wallet disguised as a wife. That realization didn't hurt. It cooled me. "I'll take a look," I finally said. He smiled. A satisfied, almost relieved smile. He thought the conversation was over. But for me, it was the beginning. Each step felt rehearsed. Controlled. A woman walking through the remains of a life she no longer planned to keep. The bedroom was dim, the curtains half drawn. My graduation robe still lay draped over the chair. The same robe he never saw me wear. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it. Not crying. Not angry. Just hollow. I touched the fabric, felt the smoothness, the weight, and whispered to myself, he never came. He never cared. That truth didn't break me. It freed me. The anger that showed up wasn't loud, wasn't violent. It was precise. A cold edge running along the inside of my ribs. A sharpened calmness. It didn't say, "How could he?" It said, "Watch him. Study him. Don't let him see you bleed." I checked his location history. He had forgotten to disable syncing. A hotel. Right outside Denver. 2 nights before graduation. He stayed for 5 hours. His card statement, the same one he always left open on the shared account, showed a charge for a VIP Super Bowl experience package. Exactly $2,512.43. So that's why he needed the money. Because cheating wasn't just emotional. It was expensive. I closed the app, set the phone down, and stared at the wall with a clarity that felt almost dangerous. It was about pattern. A man who skipped my once-in-a-lifetime moment to chase a temporary thrill. A man who lied effortlessly because he believed I'd never question him. A man who secretly used me because he counted on my softness, my patience, my forgiveness. That's when the numbness began to settle into place. Not painful numbness. Strategic numbness. The kind you need before making your first calculated move. "Shay? You good? Good? Good?" I didn't answer. He cracked the door open anyway because boundaries were suggestions to him and leaned in with that familiar concerned expression that always looked slightly crooked. "You look tired," he said. I wasn't tired. I was watching the last remnants of our marriage burn in silence. But I nodded. He stepped closer, touched my shoulder. A touch that once felt intimate now felt accidental. Like his hand had simply landed on a stranger. He tilted his head. "You'll help me, right? I just need the money for a little bit." "Okay." That's all I said. His relief was visible. Excessive, even. He kissed the top of my head and walked away humming. Humming. Like life was good. Like his world was stable. Like he wasn't standing on the edge of a cliff I was quietly building under him. It ends in a vow. And my vow that night was simple. I would no longer give him the emotional reactions he fed on. No anger. No tears. No open confrontation. That would only warn him. Instead, I would answer his betrayal with silence, analysis, patience, timing, and eventually, retribution so quiet he wouldn't hear it until it was already complete. I lay down in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to him snore beside me like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't broken anything. That was the moment I finally felt nothing for him. Not hatred, not love. Just a distant, cold acceptance. The kind that always comes right before a plan. Because the next morning, I discovered something that didn't just confirm the betrayal. It multiplied it. Morning light has a way of exposing things. Dust, cracks, truths that prefer darkness. I woke before him, not because of habit, but because my mind was already moving. Quietly, methodically, like gears that had been rusted for years suddenly snapping back into motion. He slept beside me, blissfully unaware, mouth slightly open, breathing in that heavy, careless rhythm of a man who believed his world was untouchable. It wasn't. He'd tossed it on the chair, A gray one, faded, frayed, and familiar. I never touched his things. But this morning wasn't ordinary. I reached into the pockets. Deliberately. Slowly. Not hoping to find anything, but expecting to. And there it was. A hotel key card. Still active. Still warm from his pocket. Room 409. Denver Lodge on Layton Street. The same hotel from the synced location history. My fingertips went numb. Not from shock. From confirmation. There is a unique kind of cold that settles inside you when a suspicion becomes a fact you can hold. I slipped the key card into my robe pocket and stood very still, listening to the sound of his sleep. It felt like listening to someone else's husband. Someone I no longer owed softness to. A bigger one. A louder one. Even though it didn't make a sound. His laptop was open on the kitchen counter downstairs. The screen locked. His mug beside it. Steam rising like nothing was wrong. He never left it unlocked. Never left it unattended. That alone was suspicious. But the universe, or fate, or simply karma having its morning coffee, decided to nudge me. Because when I bumped the mouse, the screen flickered awake, unlocked, wide open, exposed. I stared. Breath held. Heart steady. Then I looked, really looked, right on the desktop, like a child trying to hide in plain sight. Sat a folder titled, Backup A. Idea. The name meant nothing. Until it did, because inside were screenshots. Dozens. Hundreds. Messages. Transactions. Photo attachments. Time-stamped calls. And names. Not one woman. Not two. Three. 3 different women he'd been talking to in the last 5 months. The graduation wasn't a one-time betrayal. It wasn't even the worst one. It was simply the one that revealed the rest. The actual twist. The part that made my pulse stay calm instead of racing. He wasn't just cheating. He was financing one of them. Sending her monthly payments. Rent. Bills. Gifts. Transfers labeled support. And the source of the money? My account. My scholarships. My graduate stipend. My savings. He'd been siphoning from our shared account. And using my funds to play the hero in another woman's life. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't shatter. Nothing inside me broke. What I felt was a slow, rising steadiness. Not anger. Not grief. Strategy. Finally, I knew exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. At 9:22 a.m., he stumbled downstairs, rubbing his eyes. Hair messy. Voice groggy. Pretending to be harmless. He kissed my cheek. I didn't move. He sat at the table. I made coffee. The silence between us grew teeth. Then his phone rang. He answered quickly. Too quickly. Like someone picking up a call from the person they're afraid to keep waiting. He stepped into the mudroom, thinking he was private. But not private enough. His voice dropped into that guilty whisper. The one I'd heard at 2:14 a.m. He said, "Yeah. I'm gonna get the money from her today. She thinks I'm struggling. She'll help. She always helps." That was the moment something deep in me locked into place. A woman can only be underestimated for so long before she becomes something else entirely. Revenge isn't rage, it's architecture. And that morning I began building, piece by piece, the hotel key card, the financial records, the messages, the transactions, the timeline, the lies. I saved everything, transferred files to a hidden drive, organized them quietly. Because if you're going to dismantle a man like him, you do it with precision. One truth at a time. And not once that entire morning did I raise my voice. Not once did I confront him. Not once did I give him the satisfaction of reaction. Silence is the oxygen of guilt. And I planned to suffocate him with it. The universe wasn't finished. When I grabbed the mail from the porch, a letter slipped out. Addressed to him, not me. From a bank I didn't recognize. I opened it. A loan statement. A loan taken out in my name. Forged signature. Forged documents. Forged approval. Over $18,000. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't blur. My pulse didn't rise. Because this wasn't betrayal anymore. This was a crime. A secret bigger than cheating. Bigger than the hotel. Bigger than the money he'd taken. This was leverage. Perfect leverage. This, I murmured. This is how you end someone quietly. I stood in the doorway, holding that letter, listening to him laugh in the other room, and realized, He had no idea I now held every weapon I'd ever need. No idea that I knew about the women. The money. The hotel. The loan. The lies. No idea that I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was preparing. And the next step would be the first real strike. There is a very specific moment. When revenge stops being an idea and becomes an action. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just deliberate. Mine happened exactly 36 hours after discovering the forged loan. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Confrontation alerts the guilty. Silence ruins them. So I played my part. Soft voice, gentle posture, cooperative tone, while constructing something he would never see coming. It was against the system he used to hurt me. At 9:07 a.m., I drove to the bank listed on the forged loan document. The building stood tall and glassy, the kind of structure designed to intimidate you into compliance. But I walked in calm, cold, prepared. The representative, a woman with soft eyes and sharper instincts, listened quietly as I explained the situation without emotion. Stolen identity, forged signature, unauthorized loan, documentation he never thought I'd find. She asked me if I suspected the person responsible. Yes, I said. But I didn't say his name. Not yet. Instead, I requested a full identity theft report, an internal fraud investigation, a freeze on all joint activity, a written statement acknowledging the forgery. The woman typed everything in silence, glancing at me occasionally. Not with pity, but with recognition. She had seen this pattern before. Women paying for men who never gave anything back. When I left, the investigation was officially open. The loan was flagged. The account was flagged. And his access, the access he thought I'd never notice, was closing one gate at a time. A small move. But it was the beginning of his unraveling. Almost invisible. I came home that afternoon with groceries in my hands and strategy in my chest. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day, joked about that money he needed. I smiled. A careful smile. Just stiff enough to hide the truth but soft enough to keep him blind. Then I offered something he never expected. I'll send it tonight. I told him. He looked relieved. That disgusting kind of relief that comes from believing he'd won. But the moment he walked away, I went to my desk, opened the banking app, and quietly transferred every remaining dollar from our shared account into one he couldn't access. Legally mine. Secure. Private. Every cent. Not just the money he stole. Not just the savings I'd earned. All of it. Because shared accounts aren't safe with a man who considers your future his spending money. He didn't know the vault he counted on was empty. That the well he thought he owned had quietly run dry. At 8:52 p.m., he approached me with a tight smile, hands stuffed in his pockets. Voice a little softer than usual. Hey. Did you send the $2,500? I nodded. Calm. Rehearsed. It'll go through by morning. He exhaled. One of those finally breaths that reveal far more than words. Then he hugged me. A long hug. The kind meant to soothe his guilt, not my pain. I let him. I even leaned into it. Not because I felt anything, but because he needed to believe I did. That's how traps work. You keep the bait soft. It was his phone. Because that night, while he showered, it buzzed again. A message preview. One he forgot to turn off. From a woman named Arya. You're the best, babe. Thanks for covering rent again. I don't know what I'd do without you. That wasn't just cheating. That was investment. Not in love, but in options. He wasn't planning to leave me, but he was building comfort outside our marriage. Security. A backup life. That's when the pieces rearranged themselves into a new picture. He didn't intend to divorce me. He intended to drain me. Until I was empty. Emotionally, financially, mentally. Then he'd move on. I felt no pain. Only clarity. And in that clarity, I made the decision that changed everything. I would not destroy him with noise. I would destroy him with paperwork, timing, and silence. The kind of silence that doesn't echo. It suffocates. When he came out of the shower, steam trailing behind him, towel low on his waist, he smiled at me. Thanks again, he said. You always have my back. Of course. He kissed me. And I let him. Because tomorrow would be the true turning point. Not the revenge itself, but the moment he unknowingly set it into motion. That night, while he slept, I opened my laptop, and booked a hotel room under his name. At the exact same hotel where he cheated. Room 409, check in tomorrow. And that single decision would become the spark for his collapse. People assume revenge feels like fire, rage, heat, adrenaline. But the truest kind, the kind that works, feels like ice. Still, controlled, predictable. You don't strike first. You test. You observe. You let the guilty create the blueprint for their own downfall. And that's exactly what I did. It was the thermometer. A way to test his instincts, measure his dishonesty, see how quickly he ran to the flame when he thought he wouldn't get burned. I wanted to know, would he lie again? Would he sneak out? Would he use the reservation as an opportunity? Would he reveal the pattern he thought he'd hidden? So I gave him the chance. All silent. All calculated. At breakfast, he acted sweet. Too sweet. The version of himself he only used when he needed something. He complimented the eggs, though he'd never once cared how I cooked them. He commented on how beautifully calm I seemed. Never noticing calmness is what women become, when they've already detached. He even offered to help with dishes. When a man with a guilty conscience becomes helpful, it's never random. It's compensation. And I let him compensate. Let him believe he was charming me back to softness. Because people reveal more when they think you're under their spell. At 11:14 a.m., I casually left my phone unlocked on the table. A fake banking notification visible on the screen. Payment of $2,500 scheduled. Transfers pending. I didn't look at him. Didn't turn. Didn't react. I simply walked to the laundry room, leaving the door halfway open. Just enough to listen. There was silence. Then a small, satisfied chuckle. Then the sound of him texting. Fast. Urgent. Excited. He thought he'd secured the money. Thought I was reliable. Predictable. Soft. Perfect. At noon, I mentioned casually, innocently that I planned to spend the evening at a study group on campus. A lie, but one carefully placed. His reaction? A little too relieved. A little too quick. He nodded, smiling with that forced, humble grin he used when pretending not to care too much about his freedom. Yeah, you should go. You deserve a break. He said, almost pushing the words. He wanted me out of the house. He needed it. And that need told me everything. His phone kept lighting up with messages. Names I already knew by heart. Aria. L. Mads. Different women. Different tones. Different promises. He wasn't even strategic. He was sloppy with confidence. A man who believes he'll never get caught stops trying to hide. At one point, he went upstairs, thinking I couldn't hear him. But the walls of our house had thin bones. And lies echo. He whispered, yeah. Tonight works. I'll be free. I felt nothing. Not jealousy. Not heartbreak. Just confirmation. He was going to fall into the trap he didn't know existed. At 4:32 p.m., he received an email. I knew the exact moment he opened it. His footsteps paused in the hallway. The message read, your reservation at Denver Lodge, room 409 is confirmed for tonight. He froze. And I stood at the sink, rinsing a glass, listening to my heartbeat remain perfectly steady. He walked in a minute later with a confused look. Hey. Weird question, did you book anything recently? I got some email. No. Why? His eyes narrowed. Just a little. Not suspicion. Confusion. The kind of confusion cheaters feel when coincidences line up too neatly. He stared at me a second too long. As if trying to read something in my face. I gave him nothing. That was the turning point. I realized how easy he was to manipulate. When he believed he was the one in control. He paced. Checked his phone. Checked the email again. Saturday. Stood. Typed. Deleted. Retyped. He didn't trust the coincidence. But he wanted it. Badly. Room 409 was his old playground. The familiar spot. The comfortable lie. And desire always exposes the guilty. At 6:01 p.m., he made the decision that sealed his fate. He grabbed his car keys. Sprayed cologne. Changed his shirt. Put on the same hoodie that hid the first hotel key I found. He stepped into the kitchen. Voice casual. The kind of casual that sounds like a cracked window hiding a storm. I might go watch the game with a few friends tonight. You good with that? Sure, I said. I'll be busy anyway. He exhaled. Relief mixed with excitement. And kissed me on the cheek. And then, he lied to my face. Love you, he said softly. I didn't say it back. He didn't notice. He walked out, closing the door behind him with the confidence of a man walking toward pleasure, not danger. I watched from the window as he drove away, not with heaviness, but with the quiet, sharpening calm of someone who has stopped being the victim and started being the author. I followed him. Not to the hotel. Not to catch him cheating. That wasn't the point anymore. The point was to document the pattern, the lie, the destination, the intent, the timing, because evidence is currency, and silence is strategy. I watched him from a distance as he pulled into the hotel lot, the same one from the keycard in his hoodie. He looked around, checked his hair in the mirror, texted someone, waited, and then she appeared. Arya. You always remember the woman your partner cheats with. But seeing her in person? It wasn't painful, it was clarifying. She walked straight into him. Hug first, kiss second. The kiss wasn't passionate, it was practiced, routine, familiar. The kiss of someone who'd done it many times before. And that was all I needed. Not heartbreak. Not rage. Proof. Clear. Undeniable. Perfectly timed. I didn't confront him. Didn't walk toward them. Didn't reveal a single thing. I simply turned, walked back to my car, and whispered to myself, now I know exactly how to ruin you. It was about striking. Silently. Legally. Permanently. I used to believe truth had a sound, a tremor, a shift, a breath that betrayed its own arrival. But the truth I discovered that night in mid-February. It didn't whisper. It split the air open like ice cracking under weighted footsteps. And it changed everything. The campus was quiet when I returned home from the late study group. A strange calm hovered over the neighborhood, snowfall softening the edges, lights glowing behind curtains, the world appearing deceptively gentle. I parked, stepped into the chill, inhaled it like a warning. My gut had been buzzing for days. Something was off with Aaron. Not just the usual self-absorption. Not just the thoughtless jokes about my overachiever syndrome. Not even the sting from the graduation incident that still throbbed like a bruise. No, this was deeper. More calculated. More rehearsed. When I stepped inside our home, the living room lights were still on. His jacket was on the chair. His phone charging on the counter. Shoes mismatched at the door. All signs that he hadn't meant to leave long. But he had left, and something felt staged. I moved through the house with a slow, purposeful quiet, like a hunter stepping over dry twigs. Where are you, Aaron? My bed was empty. His office chair turned, the usual clutter missing one important thing, his laptop. Gone. At 10:47 p.m. On a Tuesday. Odd. Too odd. I didn't intend to check his phone. But fate, it has a strange way of presenting evidence. His phone buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time, persistent, almost urgent. I hesitated. My chest tightened. The rational part of me whispered not to touch it. The human part of me already knew the truth was waiting. When I picked it up, the screen lit with a preview message. He left. He's at the condo already. You have 20 minutes before he starts regretting things again. The sender's name? Lena. My breath stalled. My pulse hammered. My blood iced. Lena. His coworker. The one who had always smiled too warmly, complimented him too eagerly, stood too close when she thought I wasn't watching. I opened the message thread. And the reality I found wasn't an affair. It wasn't romance. It wasn't passion or betrayal of the heart. It was something colder, calculated, designed. Thread after thread, message after message. The truth revealed itself like a slow, burning fuse. Aaron had been plotting. Not just against me. Against my future. Against my career. He had promised Lena, his coworker, his supervisor, that he would handle me. Handle me? There were messages about discouraging my graduate program. Messages mocking my goals. Messages suggesting he would keep me from outgrowing him. Messages strategizing how he'd ensure I didn't advance too far past reasonable expectations. And then, the message that broke me open: don't worry about her scholarship. She'll miss the deadline. I've got it covered. My legs weakened. The room tilted. Everything in my chest hollowed out. My scholarship. The thing that made grad school financially possible. The deadline I never saw. The deadline he claimed was extended. The deadline he promised to help me with, he had sabotaged it, deliberately, proudly, with someone applauding him for it. I didn't cry. Not yet. The human reflex to crumble. It flickered. But something colder stepped in front of it. When I dug deeper, the messages mentioned a backup plan. A voice note. Just in case she figures things out. My stomach tightened. I checked the files. One audio recording. 4 minutes long. Timestamped 2 months ago. I pressed play. Aaron's voice filled my living room, confident, easy, bragging in a tone he never used around me. Cheyenne? She thinks she's the star of her own movie. Let her. It makes her easier to manipulate. She trusts me way too much. I'll take care of it. Laughter. Not his alone. Lena's. Sharp. Encouraging. Just make sure she doesn't get that grant. If she does, she'll take off. And you'll be back to being average. We both know you can't compete with her. Another laugh. His. Careless. Ugly. Relax. She won't get anywhere without me twisting the right knobs. Something in me cooled so suddenly it felt like ice replacing blood. This was not a man who forgot my graduation out of stupidity. This was a man preventing me from growing. On purpose. The old Cheyenne, the loyal one, the one who assumed love made a person safe, died in that moment. What rose in her place wasn't rage. It was clarity. Cold, steady, razor-sharp clarity. I wasn't just dealing with a negligent husband. I was dealing with someone who resented my potential. Someone invested in my failure. Someone threading quiet sabotage through the seams of my life. And sabotage. That's reversible, traceable, punishable. I stared at the charging phone. At the messages. The voice note. Every breadcrumb of deceit leading me to the core truth. Aaron didn't ruin my graduation by accident. He didn't mislead me about that scholarship by accident. He didn't forget or slip, or misunderstand. He orchestrated all of it. To contain me, dim me, shrink me into something that kept his ego intact. But the irony? In trying to stunt my growth, he gave me every weapon I needed. Right as I sat there stunned, hollow, furious, a new message appeared at the top of the screen. From Lena. Is she still clueless? Once the tax return hits, he'll be fine. Did he tell you he plans to ask her for her half? He swears she'll hand it over. My throat tightened. But not from heartbreak. From revelation. My tax documents? My academic records? My files. Everything had recently gone missing. At first, I suspected disorganization. Now, I understood. Aaron was preparing to drain me financially next. Maybe that was his endgame. Keep me weakened. Dependent. But he forgot something vital. He wasn't the only one who could plan. And I research. I observe. I adapt. That night at 11:06 p.m., sitting in my dim living room, the midpoint of the story fell into place. And the chapter that followed, my revenge, would reshape both of our futures. Because the next person I exposed wasn't Aaron. It was someone far more powerful. And they had no idea I knew. If you're still with me, listening to every unraveling thread, take a moment, tell me in the comments what you would have done if you heard that recording. And subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. We're just getting to the good part. Some betrayals knock the air out of you. Others, they rearrange your entire understanding of who you are. Aaron's betrayal did both. But after the initial shock, after the numbness settled into my bones, something sharper emerged. Not rage. Not grief. Precision. The same precision I'd used in research labs, in clinical observation, in hundreds of hours of academic grind. Only now, it had a target. The night I found that voice note, I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't break dishes or demand explanations. That would have been dramatic. Cathartic. But useless. I needed evidence. I needed leverage. I needed a trail that didn't lead back to me until I wanted it to. So I started where every smart strategy begins, with quiet, meticulous documentation. I downloaded the recording. Screenshotted every message. Copied his shared files, hidden folders, deleted cloud archives. Everything. I labeled them. Timestamped them. Sorted them. By 2:14 a.m., I had a digital vault, passworded, mirrored, backed up, encrypted. Aaron believed he was subtle. He believed his manipulation was invisible. But manipulation leaves footprints. And I was done ignoring them. This was the beginning. Most people would assume the next move was confronting Aaron, or exposing him to HR, or sending everything to the people he worked with. But that would have been too small, too predictable, too satisfying for him. Because Aaron wasn't the mastermind. He wasn't the one pulling strings professionally. He was the pawn of someone who benefited from my downfall. Someone who worked at the graduate program I applied to. Someone I had once admired. Someone who made decisions about funding. And their name appeared in those screenshots for the first time 3 hours after I started digging. Dr. Ray approves everything. Don't worry. He said she's not the right fit for the research environment anyway. I froze. Dr. Ray. Professor. Committee chair. Grant reviewer. He had written me a glowing recommendation letter, smiling to my face. But behind closed doors, he sabotaged me, fed Aaron false info about deadlines. Ensured my application never reached the board. And for what? The messages revealed it. She's too ambitious. Cheyenne will replace people if we let her keep climbing. I wasn't rejected. I was blocked. Strategically. By a man who felt threatened. The realization didn't crush me. It sharpened me. Because now I understood something critical. Aaron wasn't the enemy. He was just the delivery system. The real infection lived higher. So I sent one anonymous message to the university's internal compliance office. No accusations. No dramatic claims. Just the audio file. Untitled. Untraced. Sent from a clean device I borrowed from a library kiosk. Within hours. It detonated. I didn't discover the fallout through gossip. I found out through silence. The kind of silence that follows an unexpected explosion. Emails went quiet. The department's website listed temporary leave under his profile. My faculty contacts, usually slow, polite, started messaging me. Cheyenne, are you available to talk? There's a new opening in the fellowship committee. We'd love to discuss your application again. Something came up. Can we schedule a review? My hands shook not from fear, but from something like power returning. They didn't know it was me. They only knew a scandal hit one of their department heads. And because academia protects itself before it protects its professors, they acted fast. Dr. Ray's influence vanished overnight. A quiet victory. One that set the tone for everything to come. Now, all that remained was Aaron. The man who never thought I'd connect the dots. When Aaron returned that morning from his condo meeting, he walked in humming. Loose. Carefree. The sound curdled something in me. But I didn't let it show. I greeted him. Softly. Casually. A tone he didn't deserve. He didn't notice anything off. He never questioned the stillness in my voice. He never saw the distance in my eyes. People like him rarely do. They mistake quiet for submission. Calm for weakness. He kissed my cheek. I didn't flinch. He asked how my study session went. I told him it was productive. He didn't ask what I meant. He never digs beyond the surface. And as he moved around the kitchen, complaining about the cold weather and the price of gas, something surreal washed over me. He truly believed he still had the upper hand. He thought I was clueless. He thought he was safe. He had no idea that while he slept today, I'd already taken out his strongest ally. He had no idea the ground beneath him was already cracking. Now that I understood why he sabotaged me, his fear, his insecurity, his need for control, I knew exactly how to dismantle him. Not emotionally. Not romantically. Strategically. I started small. I changed a setting on our shared bank account, quietly limiting his access. Not enough for him to notice. Just enough to monitor every transaction he made. Then I checked his tax documents, the ones he misplaced. And I found something else. He had filed a joint claim that benefited only him. He had planned to use my income, my education credits, my filing details, to get a massive refund. A refund he had already promised Lena he'd use to fund a trip. Without me. My stomach tightened, but not with sadness. With resolve. He wanted my half? He'd get nothing. 3 days later, he gave me my opening. Aaron came home pacing. Stressed. Agitated. He muttered about something happening at work. Some sudden investigation. Some unexpected mess. He claimed not to know details, but his face was pale. He tried to distract himself by asking me casually if my tax paperwork was ready. If I could send over the files. If I had time to go over numbers together this weekend. His voice was light, but his eyes were hunting. He needed that refund. He needed the money. He needed control. I nodded softly, told him I'd pull everything up later. And in that exact moment, I knew I had him, because desperation makes people sloppy. And sloppy people are easy to dismantle. That night, after he fell asleep, I finalized phase 1 of my revenge. I locked the tax account, requested identity verification flags, filed a fraud alert, set up notifications so every attempt he made to access anything would ping me first. Then I printed copies of the messages where he and Lena discussed using my financial info. I sealed them, addressed them, to HR, to the IRS local office, to the company's ethics board. I didn't send them yet. Not until I needed to. But preparation? Preparation is power. And power was something he had never expected me to reclaim. But the real turning point wasn't the fraud alert, or the quiet traps, or the downfall of Dr. Ray. It was the person I contacted next. Someone Aaron trusted more than anyone. Someone who had already begun doubting him, long before I ever found the truth. And they were ready, eager, even to help me take him down. Some consequences roar. Others drift in quietly, like snow falling over a crime scene. By the time you notice the weight, it's already too late. That's what happened to Aaron. And to everyone who thought I'd stay contained. Because once the first domino falls, nothing, and no one, stays standing. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't HR. It wasn't a friend. It was someone closer. Someone with more to lose. Someone who'd been suspicious of Aaron long before I ever confronted the truth. His mother, Elaine. A woman who hid steel beneath soft smiles, who watched everything, who read people like weather patterns. And unlike her son, she didn't miss details. We hadn't spoken much recently, it wasn't my choice. Aaron slowly isolated us. Fewer visits. Fewer calls. Subtle discouragements. But mothers aren't blind. They notice patterns. They feel tremors their children try to bury. So when I called her at 10 p.m. sharp, she answered on the first ring. I didn't tearfully confess. I didn't crumble. I simply said, I need to show you something about Aaron. And I need you to stay calm. She stayed calm. When I arrived at her house, she already had tea made, lights dimmed, a blanket folded for me on the couch like she'd been waiting for this moment. And when I played her the voice note, when I showed her the messages, her face didn't twist with disbelief, or horror, or denial. It hardened, solid, sharp, like tempered glass meeting a hammer. She whispered one sentence that chilled me deeper than anything Aaron had ever said. I knew he was lying. I just never imagined he was capable of this. Not capable of cheating, or laziness, or forgetfulness. Capable of sabotage, cruelty, calculated insecurity disguised as charm. She didn't cry. She didn't defend him. She asked, "What do you need?" And in that moment, I realized something important. I wasn't alone. Someone else had been waiting for the cracks to reveal themselves. Someone who knew how far Aaron's entitlement could stretch. Someone who, unlike him, understood exactly who he was up against. And with a single ally, the dominoes began their slow, inevitable fall. By Thursday, the university had placed Dr. Ray on mandatory leave for undisclosed reasons. The academic department buzzed with rumors. Students whispered. Admin staff walked briskly through halls with tight expressions. Aaron, meanwhile, returned home anxious, irritated, pacing like a wolf circling its own tail. His voice cracked when he said, "Everything's crazy at work." He didn't know that his coworker Lena had been questioned by HR. He didn't know that her messages were now evidence. He didn't know that his name had been mentioned in an ethics inquiry, tied to her misconduct. Not because of me, but because his own behavior with her had been so reckless, so visible, so unprofessional, that when she came under scrutiny, they dragged him in automatically. It wasn't even my doing. Not yet. It was karma beginning the cleanup. He had no idea why his supervisor avoided him that afternoon. Why his company login glitched. Why his password reset failed twice. Why 2 coworkers didn't look him in the eye. Consequence doesn't always start loudly. Sometimes, it flickers like a warning before the true collapse begins. While his workplace simmered with tension, I was building something quieter. I moved money. Not his mine. The funds he couldn't see. The savings he didn't know about. The scholarship stipend that had been deposited months ago because Dr. Ray's sabotage didn't erase the acceptance letter, just delayed it. Yes. I had been accepted into another program. A better one. He didn't know because I wanted to watch how far he'd go without knowing I was already rising. Already chosen. Already stepping forward without his permission. I moved every cent into a separate account. I rerouted my paycheck. I changed payroll details. I updated my permanent address to a P.O. box. I secured my exit, before he ever saw it coming, Saturday morning. He woke up irritated, slamming drawers, grumbling about his phone, muttering curses at the rug like it deserved blame. Finally, he sat beside me on the couch. Casual, too casual. And he asked, "Hey, when are we going to do our taxes? I really need to file soon." I felt it. The shift. The moment a predator realizes the forest around him has changed. He wasn't asking. He was fishing, pressing, desperate. My voice stayed smooth. I said I'd look at things this week. He nodded quickly. Relief flickered across his features. But desperation has a scent. And he smelled of it. He needed that money. Badly. And I was the gatekeeper now. On Tuesday afternoon, it happened. He came home early. White-faced, shaking. He said the company temporarily suspended him pending review. He tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding. A misfiled report. Office politics. But his voice was too fragile, too fractured. I knew the truth. Remember those printed copies of their messages? I hadn't sent them anywhere yet, but Lena had apparently broken under pressure. Thrown him under the bus to save herself. Accused him of inappropriate collaboration. Of sharing confidential info. Of discussing internal decisions with outsiders. Everything she pinned on him was true. But the irony? She didn't even know I existed in this game yet. This domino fell without me pushing it. I watched him crumble into the couch, breathing hard. He put his head in his hands and whispered, "Why is everything falling apart?" And in that moment, I felt nothing for him. Not pity. Not sympathy. Not warmth. Only clarity. Everything was falling apart because he built his life on cruelty and lies. And structures like that never stand for long. I waited until he showered. Until the walls steamed. Until I heard water hitting tile at just the right rhythm. Then I took the sealed envelopes, the ones addressed to HR, IRS, ethics boards. The ones containing screenshots, messages, audio files. And I slipped 2 of them into my bag. I didn't mail them all. Not yet. Just one. The one for his company's ethics board. And I didn't leave fingerprints on the paper. Or the envelope. Or the Dropbox. Silent. Clean. Untraceable. When the envelope slid inside the metal slot, something inside me shifted. Not joy. Not triumph. Certainty. This was the moment the dominoes turned from coincidence to choice. 2 days later, Elaine, his mother, called him. Not gently. Not warmly. She asked why he had lied about my scholarship. Why he talked about me like a burden. Why he manipulated deadlines. Why he used my financial documents. He panicked. Stuttered. Fumbled. Lied. She didn't buy a single word. He stormed into our living room afterward, pacing, muttering that I must have said something to her. I sat quietly. Hands folded. Expression steady. He kept pacing. Kept unraveling. Kept cracking at the seams. And I said nothing. Silence can be lethal. Especially to guilty men. By the end of the week, his job placed him under full investigation. His supervisor restricted his access. His coworkers avoided him. His mother sided with me. His financial plan crumbled when he couldn't access my documents. His tax refund was frozen due to unusual activity. Lena blocked him on everything. Every piece of his identity. Every structure he relied on. Every quiet advantage he thought he had, collapsed. Not loudly. Not violently. Just one soft click at a time, like dominoes falling. Exactly as planned. But none of that compared to the next chapter, because the next consequence wasn't about his job, or his mother, or money. It was about his identity. The version of himself he thought he could maintain forever. And I was about to take that, too. Because the next person who turned against him was the last one he ever expected. And once they did, everything else burned. There's a particular moment in any confrontation that matters most. Not the shouting, not the tears, not the dramatic accusations. The moment that matters is when the other person realizes their control is gone. Their lies have been exposed. And their carefully constructed identity is nothing but a fragile mask. I gave Aaron that moment. And I savored it quietly, coldly, deliberately. I invited him to talk, though I already knew what he needed was exposure. Not discussion. Not reconciliation. Exposure. He arrived, nervous, shuffling his feet, adjusting his jacket like armor, eyes darting for reassurance, hands fidgeting with nothing in particular. I led him to the living room. Sitting across from him, arms folded, expression neutral, calm. The calm of someone who knows every card in the deck. I didn't speak immediately. I didn't need to. The silence itself was a spotlight, and he stepped into it willingly. "You've been busy," I said softly. Not accusatory. Just a statement. Like the first line of a cold wind. He shifted, uncomfortable. I don't know what you mean." Voice faltering. "Yes. You do." I leaned forward slightly, sliding a small stack of papers across the table toward him. Screenshots. Messages. The audio recording. All neatly labeled. All undeniable. His hands froze above them. He stared. Then tried to laugh. "Cheyenne, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like." The mask faltered. A twitch in his jaw. A flicker in his eye. The first visible crack in his carefully cultivated persona. He babbled, stumbled through explanations, excuses, denials, shifting blame. But the cracks widened with every word. "I didn't, she made me. I only." It wasn't like. I didn't interrupt. I let him reveal his own guilt. The brilliance of this moment. He believed he was negotiating. He believed he still had influence, while quietly, he was dismantling himself. I watched him do my work for me. At one point, he looked up, eyes wild, desperate, searching my face for any hint of mercy. He didn't find any. I told him softly, "You didn't just betray me, you sabotaged my future. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I'd stay small, dependent, silent, obedient. That's over." He went pale, hands shaking slightly, voice cracking. For the first time, he understood that all of his subtle manipulations had failed. All of them. I placed the last envelope on the table marked HR, Ethics Board, IRS. "If you try to manipulate anything, if you try to cover this up, it's all going public. Every message, every recording, every attempt you made to undermine me." I didn't yell. I didn't threaten theatrically. I didn't even raise my voice. Cold, quiet authority did the damage. He slumped back in his chair, head in hands, silent, hollow, finally powerless. This was the moment the mask fell completely. The charming, entitled, manipulative husband was gone. What remained was fear, shame, and a very quiet realization. I had won. Not by yelling, not by begging, not by drama, but by calculation, patience, and strategy. He looked up once. Eyes wet, voice low. "Cheyenne, why are you like this?" I leaned back, let the words hang in the air. They were meaningless. And then I said softly, deliberately, "Because I refuse to be your victim. Because I refuse to let you decide my worth. And because someone needed to make sure you faced reality." Before it was too late. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He didn't speak. Just silence. A silence heavy with the weight of his own undoing. I realized then that confrontation isn't about winning a fight. It's about showing the guilty exactly what they've lost. And letting them feel it. Aaron stayed on the couch, silent, broken in ways he hadn't imagined possible. And I knew the final domino wasn't him. It was the moment he would have to face the world. Without his lies, without his control, and with no one left to hide behind. By this point, Aaron was broken. Not loud, not dramatic, not on the floor screaming. No. Broken quietly inside, in the places he had once believed untouchable. I should have felt satisfaction. And I did. But only a fraction. Because the final twist wasn't about him. It was about the person I never suspected. It arrived at 3:02 a.m. A.M., a simple email. No subject line. No sender name. Just an attachment. I hesitated. A flicker of caution crept into my mind. Curiosity won. I opened it. Inside were screenshots, files, evidence, not of Aaron, not of Lena, but of someone above him, someone whose shadow had loomed over my life quietly, invisibly, someone controlling outcomes I thought I had already reclaimed. Dr. Ray? Gone. HR? Taken care of. But this was bigger. A powerful board member. Someone who had influenced admissions, funding, scholarships, even the scholarship committee Aaron thought he controlled. And the screenshots, they revealed a plot. To use Aaron as a tool to block me permanently. The puppeteer had been caught. I realized that every move I had made, every step I thought was purely mine, had actually aligned perfectly with fate. Aaron's mistakes, his arrogance, his sabotage, all of it, had exposed the larger scheme. The irony wasn't lost on me. He believed he was powerful. He believed he could control me. And in doing so he had created the opening that exposed both him and the real threat. I did not panic. I did not hesitate. Step by step, I dismantled the board member's influence, collected the evidence from Aaron's messages, cross-referenced it with public complaints and internal missteps, compiled a timeline showing deliberate manipulation to block my progress, sent the report anonymously to multiple oversight agencies, internal compliance, ethics boards, and legal oversight offices. I didn't reveal my identity. I didn't need to. The betrayals would fall themselves, and they did. By morning, investigations were launched, decisions were frozen, emails were traced. Those involved scrambled to cover themselves. I didn't watch. I didn't gloat. I simply waited. And for the first time, I felt free. Aaron came to me that afternoon. Desperate. Frantic. Begging not for forgiveness but for guidance. Cheyenne, I don't understand. Everything's falling apart. Help me. I looked at him. Calm. Silent. Cold. And I realized something important. I owed him nothing. Nothing. I didn't rise to the bait. I didn't correct him. I didn't rescue him. He had built his house of cards. And it had collapsed. Because the irony of his greed, arrogance, and blind control was now a lesson he would never forget. But the twist, the final, poetic shift, was that I didn't have to fight anymore. I had already won. Not through anger. Not through shouting. Not through desperation. I had won quietly, patiently, intelligently. The world now moved in my favor. Every piece of sabotage had backfired. Every manipulative hand that tried to control me had revealed itself. And the most satisfying truth of all? I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need revenge to be loud. I didn't need to break him completely. I only needed to be unbreakable. I walked through campus the next morning. Winter sun reflecting on snow. Quiet streets. I held my acceptance letter in my hand. The scholarship reinstated. Funds secured. No one could touch me. I saw students bustling past, friends chatting, life moving forward. And I smiled small, controlled, unassuming. Not because I had defeated them, but because I had reclaimed myself. That is the real power. The storm of consequences had passed. But there was one last reflection, one quiet moment, where I fully realized how completely I had reclaimed my life. And no one would ever control me again. After the storm, there is calm. Not the false calm of ignorance. Not the fragile calm of compromise. But the calm of someone who has watched the world tilt, and then put it back exactly where it belongs. The aftermath wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic explosions or shouting matches. It was quiet. It was deliberate. And it was mine. I moved into a small apartment close to campus. Bright walls, minimal furniture, space to think, space to breathe, space to rebuild. Every corner reminded me of control regained. Every object placed with intention, a quiet testament to agency. Control is quiet power. Power is quiet satisfaction. Satisfaction is a calm I hadn't known I was capable of. The scholarship reinstated. Funds secured. A mentor, someone who actually wanted me to succeed, offered guidance. The program that had once seemed unreachable now stretched out before me like a clear path. I wasn't just continuing my education. I was thriving. Not despite the sabotage, but because it had forced me to observe, calculate, and act. I realized the world will always have people trying to stunt growth, limit ambition, or manipulate outcomes. But true power isn't about fighting everyone. It's about understanding the landscape, knowing your own strength, and moving when others are blind to it. Aaron? He became a quiet reminder, a cautionary tale in my own mind. I didn't confront him again. I didn't need to. Seeing him crumble had been enough. Watching his desperate attempts to reclaim control fail. Enough. He had been loud, selfish, entitled, but in silence I had outmaneuvered him. And I forgave him, not for him, for me. Because resentment is heavy, and freedom is lighter. I began networking again, carefully. Not with those who had power over me, not with those who had doubts about my abilities, but with people who respected competence, integrity, and ambition. Each connection became another pillar of strength. Each step forward reminded me, I could thrive without interference. I could excel without approval. I could be untouchable because I had learned to protect myself first. Silent strategy. Quiet influence. Steady ascent. Every morning, I walked through campus with a new sense of calm authority. I didn't need to announce victories. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge to be loud. Empowerment is often invisible, subtle, untraceable, and that is what makes it unstoppable. I reflected on my journey. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the careful execution of consequences. And I smiled, not with glee, not with triumph over others, but with a deep, serene certainty. I had chosen myself. I had acted decisively. I had risen quietly but completely. True power isn't about dominance over someone else. It's about control over yourself. It's about patience, observation, calculated action, and the courage to reclaim what is rightfully yours. The quiet revenge had been satisfying. But the quiet rebuilding, the reclaiming of agency, identity, and future, was transformative. And that is where I remain. Strong, calm, empowered. Even as life resumed its quiet rhythm, I knew that power, once reclaimed, always needs vigilance. Because people like Aaron and others like him never disappear entirely. They merely wait for new cracks. But now, I am unbreakable. It's strange, the way life unfolds after the noise stops. No explosions. No dramatic confrontations. No sudden closure. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that fills every corner of a space you've reclaimed for yourself. And in that silence, you finally understand what matters. I think back to the day Aaron skipped my graduation for a football game. The sting of betrayal was sharp, cutting deeper than I expected. The audacity, the entitlement, the casual dismissal of my accomplishments, it felt unbearable at the time. But I also realize now, that moment sparked everything. Every calculated move, every careful observation, every quiet step of reclaiming control. It forced me to see the truth of people, to see my own strength, to see that power doesn't require loud action. Power requires patience, observation, and action at precisely the right moment. I've learned something critical. Revenge isn't about chaos. Revenge isn't about shaming. Revenge is about justice in the quietest, most precise form. It's about showing, without words, that betrayal has consequences. It's about proving first to yourself that you will not be diminished, that your value is not negotiable, that the world cannot decide your worth. And perhaps most importantly, revenge isn't satisfying if it compromises your own growth. The true victory lies in reclaiming agency, dignity, and freedom. I walk through campus now, head held high. Students bustle past, professors nod politely, friends laugh and gather in groups. The winter sun reflects softly on the snow. Everything looks ordinary. Everything looks calm. But I know differently. I have built a life that cannot be stolen. I have secured my place. I have safeguarded my ambitions. And I have done so quietly, without spectacle, without drama. That is the essence of power. The future is mine. Not because I have destroyed anyone else. Not because I have proven a point. But because I have chosen myself. I have ensured that my path is clear, my decisions my own, and my boundaries unbreachable. And in this serenity, I understand. Life may throw betrayals, sabotage, and manipulation. But the person who acts with patience, clarity, and intention cannot be defeated. Aaron? He is a chapter in my story. Not the entire story. The lessons remain. The scars, quiet. The triumph, deep. The future, unstoppable. Sometimes the loudest victory is the one no one hears. The one that grows silently, steadily, like roots beneath frozen ground. And that is where I stand. Strong, empowered, quietly victorious. If this story has kept you riveted, comment below. Have you ever felt the quiet power of reclaiming your life after betrayal? Subscribe, because stories like this remind us, strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's invisible, patient, unstoppable.